Hello there, my name is Alexandra Blevins and I'm the Forest Health Specialist with the Kentucky Division of Forestry.
And I'm Kenna Smith and I am the Hemlock Crew Lead for the Kentucky Division of Forestry, and we are here today to actually highlight a little bit about invasive honeysuckle removal.
We are here to demonstrate a little bit of what our crew does to remove invasive bush honeysuckle. So why are we removing this plant, you might be asking yourself? So it is a really bad invasive that we have here in the state of Kentucky. Bush honeysuckle is actually more than just one species of honeysuckle. It's multiple different species, but the most common that we have here in the state of Kentucky is called a myrrh honeysuckle, or Lonicera mackii for the scientific name. And so why is it so bad for our environment? So you'll see behind us, we're kind of in a forest of bush honeysuckle. So these plants, they grow very rapidly and they spread very rapidly, and they will actually take over and dominate our natural areas as well as urban areas. Pretty much any site that they can become established on, they will outcompete our native plants communities here in the state and in other states as well. So not only are they rapidly spreading, they also produce tons and tons of seeds. A mature plant can produce up to 1 million seeds, and they're spread by birds, so they can even, get spread around in other ways. And they can grow in pretty much any soil type. So, whether it's really great soil or disturbed sites, they can grow anywhere. And so, we're facing a lot of different obstacles with this one invasive plant. You'll notice as we are kind of moving around today, we are actually within a forest inside of a forest. So this plant, it's very shade tolerant. It can be, so it will grow in the understory of these forests, our native forests, and they will dominate the understory. But when we get light gaps, such as what's happening with the ash and the demise of the ash from the emerald ash borer, we're getting all of these light gaps that are opening up within our forests, and these invasive species such as bush honeysuckle are taking over these areas, and they can do so because they grow so rapidly and outgrow our native species. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to ID bush honeysuckle. So a little fun tidbit actually, so if you come across any bush honeysuckle, it's actually all going to be non-native. We don't have a native bush honeysuckle here in the state of Kentucky. So if you come across anything that has these characteristics, you know that it's an exotic, non-native, and you should probably think about managing it. So the first thing that you'll notice as we're walking around today is that they still have their leaves on them. So bush honeysuckle is one of the plants that is first to leaf out, and then they're the last to drop their leaves. And so it's a really good identification characteristic. And so as you can see, on the specimen that we have here, the leaves are kind of just your generic simple leaf shape. And they are arranged opposite on the branch, so that means that they, instead of alternately, they're just right across from each other. And so they remain pretty green, more green than most other plants, and they will eventually get a yellow coloration for fall before they drop. And so that's what you're going to want to look for with the leaf characteristics. And then Kenna here has those red berries that we had mentioned. They produce a lot of these red berries, and they're actually kind of, birds can spread them, but they're kind of like the fast food version of berries. Birds can get way more nutritional value from our native plants rather than these berries here. What you're seeing typically at where the berries are in the summertime, usually starting around May, They will get either yellow or white flowers on them. They're very, very fragrant, almost sickeningly sweet smelling once you've worked with bush honeysuckle for a while. And if we can look at some bark, it is a tannish gray in coloration, and it's got kind of these vertical stripes to it, or strips, and it's almost kind of shaggy as the tree gets older. Kind of will flake off on you a little bit. So, and another key characteristic, the stems of the bush honeysuckle are actually hollow. So the pith there in the middle, you can see, is hollowed out. It's almost like a straw. When you come into areas that are pretty much established with this invasive plant, it is very striking in appearance. They will become a dense thicket of all varying sizes of plants. They can be, you know, small little shrubs, and then as you'll see today, they can grow into these monster-sized trees, a multi-stemmed bush that turns into, you know, can be up to 20 feet tall. So these things, they get very big, and they like to spread. There are a couple of lookalikes, native plants that we don't want to harm when we're in a location removing bush honeysuckle. To be on the lookout for native coralberry. It won't get as large as a bush honeysuckle plant. They're going to be about, you know, knee, thigh high plants. And they actually, their berries, which you could probably see them right now, are almost a magenta pink color, and they're kind of clustered together. And then the other one that you might get bush honeysuckle confused with is our native spice bush. And so this one also has a red berry, but they're much larger and kind of oblong shaped. And if you were to kind of squash that berry or even break a twig, it's got a very fragrant, nice smell to it. So, as you can see behind Kenna and I, we are pretty much fully surrounded by the invasive bush honeysuckle. So it might seem a bit daunting at first when you're maybe starting a project, invasive removal project on your own property, or maybe you're volunteering and helping out some other organizations. But you really just have to take it a step at a time and approach it in small little bits, and believe me, they all add up in the end. And so, you know, as we were talking about before, we get some really monster size bushes, and as you can see, this one prime example behind us is about, at its base, probably about a 7 or 8 inch DBH tree. And so, you know, we're in the thick of these large plants, and we've got another one over here that's about an inch DBH. And so there's going to be multiple different ways that you tackle these different sized plants. And so we're going to touch on some of those ways to tackle these invasive plants and show you some demonstrations of what our crew has been doing, and just kind of walk you through the basics on how to approach removal on your own property. You know, there's actually multiple different ways that you can approach invasive plant removal. You know, some folks might not be as comfortable with using herbicides, so there are avenues for those folks as well. So on our smaller size plants, about bush honeysuckle that's about knee height or below, you can actually hand pull those, and you just want to make sure that you get you know, a really good solid grip around the base of that plant and pull it with all your might, and you know, get the majority of that root system, because one of the major issues with bush honeysuckle and a lot of other invasives actually is they will re-sprout like crazy. So if any of that root is left, it's going to eventually re-sprout and become another problem for you. So, you know, you've got you know, manual hand pulling that you can do for smaller plants. There are other mechanical means where you don't have to use herbicides or chemicals. There are things on the market such as weed wrenches. For folks that don't want to dabble with, you know, the chemical side of things. We don't have any of that to demonstrate today, but they are out there on the market, and you can learn about them. And then, you know, as we, and that technique can work on stems that are about 2 inches in diameter or smaller. So once you get into these bigger bush honeysuckle plants, you know, you're not really going to be able to achieve what you want with the mechanical side of things. And so, you know, I would encourage you to look into all of your options and really do the research about herbicide and proper application, because it can be a vital tool in our toolbox when it comes to removing invasive plants, not just bush honeysuckle. And so what we're going to demonstrate today are two really vital attacks to bush honeysuckle, which is first of all a cut stump treatment, and that's where we're going to get as close to the ground, cut that stump, and then apply herbicide immediately after that, and then also follow up foliar spray. And so, you know, whenever we're working with herbicides, we want to make sure that you properly read the label, follow the label, because that is the law. And as you can see, Ken and I both have on long sleeves, long pants, shoes, socks, gloves, and eye protection. So follow your PPE. You know, all of these chemicals are safe to use when doing it properly, but you want to make sure that you follow all that safety.
So to give you guys an example of bush honeysuckle removal and what Kentucky Division of Forestry has been working on, here at Big Bone Lick, they have a plethora of bush honeysuckle, and so we've actually been working on a project to help them remove some of that. So what we have right here behind me is a good example of the bush honeysuckle that we are working on removing. So as you can see, it is all entangled within itself, and we have all different sizes of bush honeysuckle, from small to very big. So one of the methods for bush honeysuckle removal is called the cut stump method. And what we do for this method is to cut the trunk of the honeysuckle as far down to the ground as we possibly can. And then once we do that, we immediately apply the herbicide. And we do that by using either a dauber or a little small sprayer. And so our sprayer or our daubers have our herbicide in them, and most of the time what we're using is a glyphosate herbicide, and so we'll use that to treat the stump. And then in the spring, if the stump has started to resprout with new leaves, then we'll use a foliage spray and spray those leaves to go ahead and finish treating the honeysuckle. On some of our smaller bushes, we'll actually use loppers and hand saws to cut the honeysuckle and then apply the herbicide. If we have large bush honeysuckle, then what we'll actually use is a chainsaw to remove the honeysuckle and then apply the herbicide afterwards.
So here we're at an area where we have currently, recently removed some bush honeysuckle, and you can actually see some still bush honeysuckle in the background of the shot. And so what we wanted to demonstrate here are these piles that we've made. And so depending on what your management perspectives are and what you want your objective and goals to be, you may be looking for some additional wildlife habitat. So these piles that we've created of the bush honeysuckle stems that have been cut, you can actually pile them on your property, and this will be a great little thicket for small mammals such as rabbits or birds. Songbirds love them. And so this is just one demonstration of how you can kind of compile these stems on your landscape to provide an extra benefit after you've cut the stems down. You can also leave them standing if you're using a foliar spray or something like that. But they will degrade pretty rapidly on the landscape once they're cut. So, as you can see this wide open space behind us, and that is because the hemlock treatment crew has been persistently coming back to this area for 3 years, first doing that cut stump of all the large bush honeysuckle plants, and then As with any invasive plant removal, follow-up is key and very necessary. So once you get that initial round of cut stump removal done, you're going to want to monitor that area and look for those resprouts that we talked about earlier. And you can use a foliar spray technique to hit those very quickly and efficiently, and that will get the remainder of those resprouts and kill those back. And you're going to want to follow through, for at least 3 to 5 years, and make sure that you are getting all of, any new seed set that might come up. And just be persistent, and persistence is key when it comes to invasive removals. But you get a really awesome reward of this wide open, beautiful woodland that you can see behind us. And once you remove a lot of that understory canopy that was taken up by the bush honeysuckle, as soon as the next year, we were finding trout lily, a wonderful native flora, also trillium species, and all different, lots of fun native plants that will come back that you might have never known that were on your land. But once you remove the bush honeysuckle that's, pretty much taking all of the light for photosynthesis, you can get some really awesome native plants that will show up the next year. Well, we'd really love to thank all of you all out there for joining us today on this virtual tour of our bush honeysuckle removal project at Big Bone Lick. And a special thanks to these folks right here. This is our Kentucky Division of Forestry hemlock crew and invasive plant removal crew that have been doing all this great work up here at Big Bone Lick. We have our crew lead, Kenna Smith, Chuck McIntosh, one of our interims, and Becca Johnson, our other interim, up here. And they've been doing a lot of hard work, so we'll give them, that virtual round of applause. And keep up the great work, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you all would like to learn more about what our Forest Health Program is doing within the Kentucky Division of Forestry, you're more than welcome to look us up on our social media page. We have a Facebook page. Just look up Kentucky Division of Forestry and you can reach out to us there. You also have excellent resources at your county extension offices through UK. And, just feel free to reach out with anything and everything forest health related.